that being shy is not so much the issue. The issue is how are you influencing? So it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, okay? There are different ways that people can influence. And when it comes to connecting, right, and communicating and connecting, there are ways that people uniquely can use their strengths to connect in a very deep manner, right? That doesn't require them to not be shy.
Hey everybody, my name is Ellen Ewan and you are listening to the PDF podcast, the Professional Development Forum, or PDF for short. The platform was established to help diverse young professionals to reach their full potential in the modern Australian workplace. Today I've got Ivan Nang with me, and he's going to talk about some of the success that he's had in his career, and especially tell more about his work in this area. And please welcome Ivan. Let's introduce yourself.
Great, thanks Ella. Really pleased to spend some time with you guys today. As Ella mentioned, I've developed a program that really helps people like you to become better at your job, and as well as we're connecting with other people. But before I get to that piece, Ella asked me to introduce a bit more about my background. Some of you may know me, some of you don't know me from a bar soap, but that's perfectly fine. So my background story is that I was originally a financial planner. I started off with the Commonwealth Bank, then went out and did my own business, grew my own business, set up my own practice. Started off with 0 clients. That was the craziest thing I ever did. But it all worked out. But it got to the stage where a lot of the work that I was doing with my financial planning clients was more in the coaching space, because it was really helping them achieve some of their more meaningful lifetime goals and dreams that they've always had. But also, more importantly as well, it was to actually help them understand how to actually impact their kids, their future generations, and as well as other team members at work. So that got me excited in terms of some of those discussions that were happening. So I ended up getting myself into the place where wasn't as excited about the financial planning business. So I ended up selling that and just focus exclusively on the coaching, but especially in terms of leadership coaching space. One of the things that I did realize from the time that transition, and as well as the work that I've done subsequently with a whole myriad of different leaders, and as well as emerging leaders, people like yourself, it was very clear that one of the things that people needed to understand and get good at is not just communication skills. Everyone knows how important communication skills is, right? But the art of connecting with people, the art of connecting deeply that will solicit trust, will get respect, but also be able to communicate with authenticity, vulnerability, and that is the basis for people to then be able to have high amount of influence. And as my mentor John C. Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. At the end of the day, if you're not influencing, you're not leading. And that's the essence of what my program is about.
Yeah, but how do you get started though? I mean, it's really daunting for especially young people, right?
Yeah.
So we understand that communicating is really important, and communicate with influence and, authenticity is really crucial.
Yeah.
How do you get started?
Yeah, it's a great question, because there's so many of these people who are going, you need to communicate with authenticity, or you need to be vulnerable, like Brene Brown, one of the famous authors that is quite popular these days. But where do you start? What do you actually draw upon in order for you to be able to communicate that way? And it goes back to you. Even if you could remember when you were first growing up as kids, what are some of the things that you most drawn to? And inevitably it's stories, right? So it's the stories that your parents told you, either be reading from a book or through just their personal life stories that they shared with you, or you listening to the stories that they talked share with your relatives or other people, and you just absorb. You're like a sponge, and you just take all these things in. And so stories are so important. So the key to it, I believe, is being able to bank, what I call banking these stories that you can actually lead with and be able to influence and impact other people's lives. And that's where I've tried to make it as simple as possible for those people that I coach. I've taken the word signature and I've applied a different topic area or theme for each of those letters in signature. And that's where the starting point is in terms of just working on some of those stories that are meaningful, not only to you, but potentially to someone else. So take S in signature, for example. We talk about sacrifice. So if I was to ask you, Ella or Washington, what are some of the things that immediately jumps in mind in terms of some of the sacrifices that have been made for you or that you have personally made to get to where you are today? I'm sure that a story comes out, right? A story comes to mind. The issue is, how do we actually craft that story? How do we actually make sure that that is ready to go so that you can actually share with someone else who may be going through one of those fork in the roads, one of those dilemmas in life in terms of whether or not they sacrifice or make a substantial sacrifice in order for them to get to where they'll like to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really helpful tip. And how do you make sure that you're relating to that person as well? Like some of the stories that you have might not be, and you mentioned that a little bit, but I just want to get deeper into that because for me, like I've been told many different advices before to go, okay, well, be yourself and be relevant and tell your stories. But how do you make sure that specific story is relevant or relatable? And you're being personable.
And that's why it's important for you to be able to have your set stories ready to go, because you don't know when you're going to be able to. Firstly, you don't know which is the right story to bring out in the first place, and secondly, you don't know which one's going to be the most impactful. All right, and unfortunately, unless you're prepared and unless you've thought it through, that opportunity may not come up straight away. Okay, so first tip is be prepared. Be prepared, be ready to go. If I was to throw something at you and say, look, someone has a negative attitude, what is an attitude story that you can actually think about? You're going to have to think about that. You're going to have to spend some time to think about, well, what is the story that I share? But if you have it ready to go, I'd be able to impact that person there and then with something that is straight from your heart, effectively, because you can't make it up. It's your story, right? So the whole reason why it links back to signature is that signature is uniquely you, Ella, uniquely you, Washington, and everyone else who's watching this particular podcast. There's no one else that's taken exactly the same path as you. So I talk about why be a copycat leader? Why be a copycat leader that aims to copy Richard Branson or Barack Obama or whoever it may be? As wonderful as a leader those guys are, they have very vastly different experiences compared to each and every one of us, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. They will definitely have their individual stories, and that's how they became who they are.
Yeah.
So I guess it's also the practicing as well. Like, do you practice to yourself? Do you practice with your peers? Or what's the go?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that when I find that when you actually bring groups of people together who are like-minded, who've got that aspiration to develop these stories, it's like iron sharpening iron. If you've got a cohort, remember back in uni days where you have tutorials. You'd attend lectures. It's like a download. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. The lecturer would just go blah 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 blah. You need to know all this. But then it's not until you actually get into a tutorial, right? It's not until you actually get inside a tutorial where you actually rip it apart, talk to each other, really discuss, debate, really have those in-depth conversations with other people who are thinking about the same things, and really then collectively help each other out. That's where the power of having the right answers and in this case, the right stories that will be able to benefit others. So whether it be just bouncing it off someone else, hopefully not your cat or your dog, they're not going to give you good feedback, right? But someone who is going to be able to give you feedback. But also importantly, don't just go for someone who's going to tell you what they think that you want to hear. All right, it's important for you to be in a group where you want to hear the right feedback, the right constructive critique, so to speak. I don't like criticism. I don't like people who are very critical and just share criticism in terms of what they think is wrong. I love critique. I love people who are positive, who are there to help you develop and grow. But also oftentimes you'll find that, it's always great to have someone who's a kind of once removed, like a facilitator or a workshop leader that can bring it back, because sometimes you'll meander and go offline, and you just need someone to be able to bring it back and stay on track and on focus.
Storytelling then becomes like a channel to actually connect to your audience, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you're just going to be talking your experience in life, and you probably just trying to make it a bit more colorful, so people like a more they absorb it in a positive way. Is that like, it's not really like you're trying to craft something for everybody, but just like tell you, like, I had like a really shit situation once upon a time, and that's what happened, and that somehow I overcome this thing, and you guys might be in the same situation. It's something a bit like so, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the thing is that yet again, it's you sharing something that's personal to you, and that's where that authenticity comes from, and that vulnerability, because you're sharing your story, because you need to be vulnerable in order for you to share your story. At the very beginning, before we started, Washington was telling me about the story about how he got his name and how his grandfather actually gave him his name. And I love those type of stories, because you don't know where they come from and what the background to that is. So, it just really intrigued me, because the thing is that, it made me want to actually delve so much deeper into what did his grandfather experience in his life that could potentially impact others. It's a regular reflection on my part as well, because the thing is that there has been so many valuable insights, wisdom, value that has been passed on to me, intentionally or otherwise, from people before me, like my grandfather, like your grandfather, that we don't actually spend the time to reflect, acknowledge, and be able to then pass on and share, so that it continues on. If it stops with you and you take it to the grave with you, I can tell you that's a shame. That's really a shame, right? Whereas if you actually record it, intentionally or otherwise, once again, I'll tell you the story. The thing is that one day I Googled my grandfather's name, and I wasn't expecting anything, but there was a hyperlink to the National Archives in Singapore, and what I found was absolutely incredible. It blew me away. It was an interview that my grandfather gave back in 1980 to someone from the National Archives, who recognized him as one of the modern day pioneers in Singapore, right? And it was an interview about his life, about what it was like for him to grow up in Singapore, what it was like for him to grow a business in Singapore, the Japanese occupation of Singapore, what happened then, and subsequent to that, what are some things that he learned, and what he had to actually do to overcome, and that resilience. Was really deep. What deeply impacted me, and that was passed on to me through this particular interview. Now, did he know that I was going to find it on Google? I would say not. Right? No way my grandfather would have had any idea of what Google meant to people like us down the track, right? But what he did was incredible. None of my relatives knew anything about it. I stumbled across it, but it has become one of the priceless treasures in my family, or for me directly, but also for my family, going forwards. in perpetuity, forever.
Yeah, your family definitely got a massive influence on you,
Yeah.
whoever you are. So I think that's and you mentioned your grandpa. You obviously are Singaporean, and so I have a question around culture as well. So obviously communications and culture that plays a massive role.
Yeah.
And I actually lived in Singapore for about a year and a half, and I was studying there when I was really young. So that was when I was in year 5.
Yeah.
And so I can understand where the communications play such an important role in. So what's your take on that, like with corporate, that kind of picture?
Yeah. It's very, very important for you to realize that from a cultural background perspective. Like I talk occasionally on cultural intelligence. It's very important for people to understand where people are from and how they communicate, because not everyone's going to be the same. Like you're hearing me talk the way that I do now. I could tell you, back in high school, I wasn't confident at all, and I wouldn't be able to have this discussion with you guys and be able to share what I'm sharing right now. What that actually tells, what I'm trying to say there is that it's a skill set. Right? It's a skill that needs to be developed. It's a skill that can be developed. And it's important for people to realize that, don't just leave it to other people. I grew up in junior school and high school in Australia, thinking that, I'd be happy if I was second in charge, but I'll never be the person up front and at the front and center, drawing all that attention and be able to talk the way they do. So, but I think that was very much a cultural thing. I'd stand back, I'll do all the great things that I needed to do in the background, but someone else can take the limelight. Whereas, that's no longer the case for me. I'm not afraid of stepping up when I need to. But it took a lot of work in terms of, learning, communication skills, learning influencing skills, soft skills that people can develop if they go look in the right place. And in this particular forum, I've had a look at all the interviewees that you've had in the past. Some of those guys are absolutely phenomenal in terms of being able to impact on the way that you think and the way that you can develop. And that's the key. It's intentionality, Ella. It's intentionality. If you don't actually get intentional about your development, who are you going to leave it to?
So it's on the long run, right? On the long term, because it's a growth progress in reality. So it's more like a matter of building new habits in life.
Yeah.
Especially like say people from Asian background, and I sort of can relate to that as well in many ways, tend to be very shy and very reserved. The less you talk, usually the wiser it is, right? Culturally.
Yeah.
So what would be your suggestions like for somebody who's super shy, that wants to be more expressive or be able to compile a story or something like that?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the thing is that there's absolutely nothing wrong about being shy. There's absolutely nothing wrong about being an introvert. In fact, I'm actually a natural introvert. Okay, so you're hearing me at this present moment, you're thinking, oh, this guy's an extrovert. No, I'm actually a natural introvert. For me to recharge, I love nothing else than to just be in a room by myself and turn on Netflix or turn on my audio books and just listen in and just be by myself. But that's how I recharge. So don't confuse being an extrovert or introvert as being someone who needs to be very boisterous or very vocal. Okay. So going back to your question, Washington, it's very important for people to realize that being shy is not so much the issue. The issue is how are you influencing? So it goes back to what I said at the very beginning, okay? There are different ways that people can influence. And when it comes to connecting, right, and communicating and connecting, there are ways that people uniquely can use their strengths to connect in a very deep manner, right? That doesn't require them to not be shy, right? Go back to what I said before. Don't be a copycat leader. Don't just go and look at some of these guys on YouTube or TED Talks or whatever and say, I need to be like them. No, That's the mistake. Okay. The thing is that you need to work out what are your strengths, what are your communication strengths, and how do you actually connect that is uniquely you, that will set you apart from other people. Right. So that's the important thing. And it's not easy, and there's no one size fit all solution. I can tell you to go and do things like, do strengths tests on yourself, read Strength Finders 2.0, and do the assessment at the back of it. That's a great book to start off with. But there's a whole myriad of different assessments that you can actually do on yourself, that would give you a better sense of who you are and how you relate to other people. And once you actually know that, all right, work to your strengths, don't work on your weaknesses, right? Because it's like anything else. If you just focus on your weaknesses, you might be able to come up to a level of mediocrity, but no further, right? But if you've got strengths and you're highlighting your strengths and you're developing your strengths, guess what? People are going to recognize that in you and be able to just be drawn to you because of those things. And it may well be that, you lead in a very different way to everyone else, and that's perfectly fine. No problems with that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's just human nature as well. Like we as human, we tend to focus on all the negatives.
Yeah.
Say, for example, if my manager were to give me some criticisms or even just advice, I would take that, okay.
And they would never do that, Ella. No, never criticize you at all, right? No, I'm just kidding. Go on.
But yeah, exactly. I feel like we always forget what we do well. We focus on the things that we did wrong or we did badly at one point in time and dwell in the past. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
What's your advice on getting out of that?
Yeah. And even if you look at, social media these days, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you might have like 100 positive comments, but 1 or 2 negative comments, and you're going, oh my goodness, you just focus in on those negative comments, right? It is human nature, right? And that's where if you're part of the right inner circle, right? If you've got the right inner circle, that's really, really important to you, right? Where you have people who are constantly talking or speaking positivity to you, who's there lifting you up and not dragging you down, right? So if you think about that imagery, in order for someone to lift you up, where do they need to be? They need to be above you, right, to be able to drag you up. Whereas, if someone's dragging you down, where do you think they need to be? They need to be below you, right? They want to drag you down to their level in order for them to feel as if they're okay. All right, and that's not okay. That's definitely not okay. So you've got to think about who are the people that you bring around you in what we call the inner circle, right? One of the leadership laws that we focus in on is the law of the inner circle, which is, who are the people around you? I think that it was Jim Rohn who said that, you are the sum of the 5 people closest to you, or something similar to that effect. And I truly believe that. So even if there's one thing that you want to take out of this particular session as an action point, at the end of it, just write down the 5 people who are closest to you, right? And who are they? And whether or not they actually speak positivity into your life and lift you up intentionally, and really want to see you succeed. Or are they people who are always dragging you down or saying something that you can't do, or focusing in on your negative traits rather than your positive traits?
Yeah, the people around you definitely influence you a lot. And I know that I have had that experience before, and I've changed a lot of things around my surroundings, and my inner circle especially, to make sure that it's leading me to a better path, basically. Yeah. But yeah, it speaks to a lot of younger people, especially millennials type of audience.
Yeah.
And that is exactly our audience as well. So thank you, Ivan, for touching on that. I had another question as well that came up during our conversations, and it's around leadership as well. So obviously we look up to leadership as the role model, but there are a lot of leaders out there that are probably not the best kind of leaders. And it's all about the power. I've got the power, I've got the title,
Yeah.
and the way they portray themselves is more so, well, if you're not on the same league or in the same league, then you're not going to be a part of this. So we, as the younger or the more junior level, would look at that and go, well, I can't talk to those people. How do you solve that problem and overcome that to begin with?
Yeah.
How do you communicate with those people is
Yeah.
my question.
Yeah. So firstly, those are what we call positional leaders. You know, they've got title, they lead using their title, and they demand respect. They demand observance from the people that they lead. Okay. That may have worked in the past, especially in a military context. That could work, because the thing is, if you don't do it in a certain way, you die, right? But you know, in the past, that's what the leadership model was based on. You know, you rise up through the ranks, you get to a certain level of authority, and that's what you have to actually obey. That's the word I was trying to think about. That didn't come immediately. You need to obey them in order for things to get done. Today, it's so different. It's so different, and it comes down to trust. It comes down to respect, and it also comes down to influence, right? So if you don't trust your leader, that's a big issue in itself. Okay, so how do you, whether or not you want to build that trust with them, if they want to build that trust with you is one thing, but if you want to actually trust them, you need to actually see as to whether or not they are trustworthy. First thing, okay, so you got to go through that analysis yourself. The second thing is, respect. What have they done in order for you to respect them as a leader? Is it that they were just in the right person at the right place at the right time to get promoted? Right? Or have they done something as part of their previous roles that have contributed to them rightly be promoted to leadership? That's where you want to actually gain a better understanding as to where they've come from and what their background is, in order for you to gain a better understanding as to what type of leaders they are. So when you're actually leading up, and that's the crux of what you're asking, Ella, how do you actually lead up when you have someone above you that you might not necessarily be getting along with at this present moment? My approach to that would be to ask really great quality questions. There is nothing wrong with you asking good quality questions of your leader in order for you to gain a better understanding, right? And it starts with, the rationale, or it might start with gaining a better understanding as to their decision-making processes, but don't stop with that. Delve a little bit deeper. Help yourself by gaining a better understanding as to how did that come about in the first place in terms of their decision-making process, right? What contributed to that? Was it something that impacted them in the past? Get them to tell those stories. If they're not good at it, it's something that you need to actually get good at in terms of asking the questions, to be able to draw that out from them. So it's what we call taking a coaching mindset. When you're coaching someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's that is junior to you. It could well be that it's someone that's senior to you, in terms of asking those right coaching questions to be able to draw out those right responses in order for you to gain an understanding as to who you're working with. Once you've got that information, then it is incumbent upon yourself to then decide, have you got the right leader to work under, or to work with? All right. And the idea is, the reflection is a very important one, because the thing is that I'm a firm believer that your leader, or whoever's above you, has a leadership lid. So John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid. There's a leadership lid that caps not only their growth and their capacity, but also yours and everyone else under them. All right. So if you are constantly hitting that lid and not going any further, guess what's going to happen? You're gonna be at loggerheads, right? You're gonna have issues with that particular leader because you can't understand them. You don't see that they're growing. You're not growing. So inevitably, what happens then? You're gonna actually have to move on and go somewhere else, right? And that's sad because we see a big turnover of a lot of people who just basically goes from one job to another, to another, to another. Effectively, what they're not leaving their jobs, they're leaving their leaders, right? You as an accountant, you're not changing your profession as an accountant. You're just going from one accounting job to another. But what you're really saying to yourself is, have I got the right person that I'm willing to work with and grow under? And if you don't, that's another story. That's a whole different discussion for another day. Because the thing is that it's something that you need to then decide as to whether or not you're willing to put up with it, how long you're going to put up with it for, and if not, what's your next step? What is it that you're looking for in terms of that next leader that you would like to actually grow under?
So it's at the end of the day, it's all what the relationship is. It's like, the circle of friends is pretty much similar way, right? Are they trying to elevate you, or they're trying to push you down or retain you to the same level of no growth? Correct. Isn't it?
Yeah, correct. And it is one of those things that people don't spend anywhere near enough time in terms of reflecting. I can tell you, towards the end of the year that we're in at this present moment, this podcast is being recorded in December. I don't know when it's going to be released, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just saying that at the end of the year, it's great for you to actually set aside some time to do these reflections. Have you got the right inner circle? Are you working under the right person? Have you got the right skill sets? Are you actually trying to, be someone that you're not? Where's that level of authenticity? Reflect on all the key milestones throughout the year and just say to yourself, have I acted authentically, and have I acted in a way that is congruent with who I am, or am I being told to be someone that I'm not? If you're not, then the question is, what is it that you're going to do about it? Because I can tell you, sooner or later, something inside of discontent is going to rise up within you, and that's where people, get sick of their jobs. They get, demotivated at work. They don't give their 100% in terms of what they do, and that's a shame. We see a lot of people like that, and it's not acceptable. For me, I love working with people who are passionate. I love people who love what they do. That's not to say that's not that's easy what they do. It could be bloody hard in terms of what they do, but at the end of the day, if you have a purpose and you have a passion in life, it gets easy. I know that those are motherhood statements, but at the end of the day, it's something that's worth reflecting on, especially towards the end of the year when it starts to slow down.
Yeah, that's some really good advice there, because it's not only about self-development, but also advice for the leadership and the people under the leadership team as well. And a goal of mine is obviously one day lead a team. Yep. And I think this is going to inspire me as well. And having all of these discussions across the board to anyone and everyone will encourage them to step up and be a leader one day. Because a person with an Asian background, I know that Washington mentioned before that our culture, it's just the way it is. It's the tradition. We don't normally speak up. And especially when we want something, we don't feel like we deserve it sometimes as well. And we want to encourage a lot more of those people to, Asian leaders out there to be on top. So it'd be excellent to see that.
So that's a very, very interesting observation. And I find that, the thing is that you've obviously grown up here in Australia. I've done so as well. I've been in Australia since '83. So, hence this. This Aussie accent that I can't get rid of.
I actually grew up in Vietnam, spent 1 year in Singapore, and I got here when I was around 11 or 12. Yeah. But practically lived here all my life. But I can see the cultures, the difference between a kid grew up here from when they were born, and then compared to someone like me, I had a lot of adapting to do as well. Yeah. So I lived both worlds at one point.
But so then there goes that you've just shared a story that I'd love for you to flesh out, Ella. You know, that journey that you've been on and what it was like for you to grow up in Australia as a non-white, non-Caucasian, but an immigrant. You know, we've got lots of people like that, and in this particular forum, there's heaps of people who are exactly the same as you, exactly the same as me. The difference is this. The thing is, it comes down to understanding that there is power in those stories, and that's why I kind of got a glimpse of what you were starting to say. You know, if we had time, we would unpack that even further in terms of your journey from Vietnam to Singapore to Australia, and what that meant to you. What did you gain along the way? What were the insights? You know, what was it like, you know, to be, you know, growing up in school as someone who was very different. And those stories, once you actually start to actually bank them away and start sharing them, and people can see that in you, you know, guess what? There are going to be those who are going to be drawn to that and say, hey, look, I want to hear more about that. I want to actually understand a little bit more about that. Because going back to something I said at the beginning of this conversation, that cultural intelligence that they can actually benefit from you, right, is going to be important for them to grow as a leader if they are looking to lead a team of multicultural team members. If they just want to lead a team of people that are exactly like them, they don't have to do anything different, right? But that's not the case anymore, right? We live in a world where we're going to lead multicultural teams. We're going to lead global teams. We're going to lead people who are you know, from various different cultures, various different races, various different backgrounds. And it's very important for you to understand how to actually benefit from those around us, like you, in terms of that cultural intelligence piece. Yet again, it comes down to intentionality. How intentional are you in terms of developing that?
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ivan, for such an insightful conversation. I definitely learned a little bit about that, and I opened up about my stories without even knowing. So
There
that
you go.
encouraged me to open up a lot more and be relatable and be personable. And that's key from our conversation today. Thank you, Washington, for taking part of the discussion as well. Really
My
enjoyed
pleasure.
the conversation together. You've definitely inspired a lot of people out there in our audience, and a lot of us are millennials. So yeah, thank you all for listening, and hopefully you guys learned something today. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for
so much.
listening to Gen Xer. You know, so I'm feeling so old now. Thanks Ella. No, just kidding. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege. You know, I've been a big fan of PDF and what you guys do for a very long time. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you guys. And you know, feel free to get in touch with me if you like to find out a little bit more.